Welcome to Family Business Diaries, the podcast where we unravel secrets of family businesses. I'm your host, Mary Asantia Samwa, and today we have the gentleman in the house, Mr. Theodore Albright. Now, if you're in the family business space and you do not know Theodore, please get to Google, do some research on him. But for now, we're going to sit at his feet and hear his story and get some great insights on family businesses in Africa. So let's delve right into it.
Theodore is a transformational and progressive leader with varied multinational career experiences across 2 continents. As a dual qualified legal practitioner, he is an original thinker with a passion for seeking elegant solutions to intractable problems. He has over 2 decades of extensive experience in general legal and corporate work, including corporate acquisitions, private equity, banking, property, tax, and trust transactions, having worked in the United Kingdom, Channel Islands, and Africa. As managing consultant for the Family Office Africa, he has overall governance responsibility for the multidisciplinary consulting firm specializing in communications, strategy, legal advice, and cybersecurity for multinational and individual corporates in Africa. Theodore holds an LLB degree in law, a BL from the Ghana School of Law, and an MBA from the University of Manchester. He is also a qualified certified trust and estate practitioner with a postgraduate diploma in risk and compliance from the University of Manchester. Via the International Compliance Association, he sits on numerous boards and was also previously the vice president of the Ghana Association of Savings and Loans Companies.
Theodore, welcome to Family Business Diaries.
I am so thrilled to be here.
I'm glad this is finally happening. Huh?
Absolutely. It's been too long.
Too long.
Absolutely.
But today, as we start season 3, I just felt it's important to get you here to talk to us about family business. Let's set the context. Let's understand a few things before we start hearing stories from businesses. So we're going to delve into it. But before that, tell us a bit about yourself. How did you get into this space? We'll keep it short, but still, I know your story is loaded.
So professionally, I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law for about 30 years. I started as a street lawyer and then was invited to join a small practice in the United Kingdom. From there, I gravitated to Guernsey in the Channel Islands, again, doing private client, private wealth law. And I worked in 2 of the premier law firms in Guernsey with a view to coming to Ghana to set up a family office.
Oh, you had that in mind, right?
I had that idea. And the idea was birthed when the then President Kufuor made mention of Ghana becoming a functioning offshore-onshore jurisdiction. And so I wanted to come and share my insights on the continent of Africa, more particularly in Ghana. Got to Ghana and found out that the dream had foundered and floundered. And so I went straight into in-house as a head of legal for a financial institution, and then latterly head of legal for Vodafone Ghana. And then in 2018, I gave birth to the Family Office Africa to give birth to the dream that I'd always had, to help family businesses and business families with scaling, with leadership, with strategy, with governance, with mindset, and intergenerational wealth transfer.
Amazing. It's been quite a journey. If you're talking Kufuor's term and we've come all this way, then but I'm glad you didn't give up the dream, because now, family business, the conversations, there's so many conversations around family office, family business, and yes, we have you with all the experience ready to help family businesses, right? So that's good. Now, since we have you here, we're gonna make this a masterclass and still get people to understand. I want us to go to the foundations. Let's go right to, what's a family business? What sets it apart from other businesses? Give us basic definitions so that our listeners can have a true understanding.
No worries at all. So right from the off, when you set up a business, your intent is normally to offer value, make a profit, and do so sustainably. End of chat. If you're a social enterprise, then you like to have social impact as well. So we don't go into businesses for fun. We go into businesses to help, make profit, and have impact and give value. And in order to do that and do that well, you need to have a purpose. That needs to be clear. You need to have a strategy. That needs to be clear. You need to look at your capabilities, etc., etc. I'm going to break all of that down in a minute, but But beyond that, it's really important to make the distinction between family businesses and business families. Typically, if you're mom and pop or pop and mom one business, then it's just a family running one business. But there are instances where you have families running a chain of businesses. And so you can put the description of being a business family because they are a family with multiple businesses running on at the same time. Multiplicity does not, in of itself, distinguish family business or business family because you can have one business and have a huge business like Walmart, for example, and that would make you a family business family. But beyond that, remembering that quite often you set up the business to make profit, to have impact, to give value, and then you have to make that choice, very strategic choice. The founder has to, whether they want to keep the business and run it in the family or spin it off and sell it off an IPO. All right. So some people very early on or later in life will say, we want to run the business and keep it in the family, or we will invite outsiders to come and support us. And if we're doing that, then it's managed buyout, leverage buyout, or an IPO, initial product offering, on the stock exchange. You have all of those varieties. But when we come down to it, it is about offering value, making sustainable profit, and if you're a social enterprise, align it with some impact as well.
I told you, masterclass, loving it. All right, so I think it's important to understand. I mean, we'll get into the challenges because this decision of are we keeping it in the family or we, invite investors and all, sometimes it's left till it's too late, right? But we'll come to those challenges. But given everything you said, in the African context, I mean, do you think what's your take on the the role that family businesses play in the economy? Do you think there are a number of businesses? Do you think it makes a difference, or are we? Is it all just a fallacy? Like, do you think it's
no? It's not a fallacy at all. SMEs are the engine of growth right across the globe, excepting maybe Cuba and North Korea. Every single country has SMEs as engines of growth. And a significant number, I'd say up to about 65, 70% of the SMEs are family led. So it's not fallacy at all to say that family businesses are engines of growth. And they come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. Really true. But in order to address this, I'd like to break the drivers, the key drivers, into two. You have the macro drivers and the micro drivers. And the macro drivers address the economy, the environment, competition, the industry. And the micro drivers are the internal decision-making points for the business. So we're looking at what's our purpose, what's our objective for going into business, what's our strategy, what are the tactics or the strategic initiatives we're going to take, what is our capability. And when you unravel capability, you're looking at what are the processes, what are the resources, and so on. What are the structures and the systems we need to put in place? All of those are internal decisions that you need to make. for the micro. And then for the macro, you're looking at the bigger picture. What's the environment within which I'm operating? So politically, economically, socially, technologically, economically, environmentally, legally or regulatory, social media wise, what does that environment look like? What does that industry look like? What does the competition look like? Those are external factors with which you have to structure your strategy to meet, mitigate, and or overcome. All right?
Okay.
So we take them apart. We're atomizing, disaggregating. So I'm going to focus for the moment on the micro, which is the internal bit for a moment. For family businesses, clearly you have a founder, 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Often there's no intention for it to last, but then with luck and a good headwind, it does. At that point, the founder has to decide whether they spin it off, sell it, or keep it in the family. Either way, they need to be pretty clear about the purpose of the business. And that is not too difficult to do. Coca-Cola, Disney, they're very clear on what their purpose is. Keep people happy, make the world a brighter place. So those are very simple, structured statements around which the business is run. But beyond stipulating your purpose, then you say, what objectively do we want to achieve? And that is a quantifiable metric. What objectively do you want to achieve? That is a quantifiable metric. Then what is the strategy? How do we win the game of the objectives that we've set? And with strategy, if I can unpackage it, you're looking at your vision. What's the best picture for the future? Your values. What are the ethics that are going to drive our agenda? And the value proposition, what are we going to give the customer to come to us? Then you have culture. You need to be intentional about your culture. I
was going to get to that. Mm-hmm.
And culture is an amalgam of your values. And as you know, culture is strategy, technology for breakfast. And therefore, if you're not intentional about your values, you're not being intentional about your culture. And if not being intentional about your culture, your strategy is not going to work. Because whether you're intentional or not, you still have a culture. It's either an emergent culture or a deliberate culture. And you need to be intentional about that. Beyond that, we have the issue of assumptions. What are the assumptions upon which you go into business? And those assumptions, sometimes they're spoken of and sometimes they're not spoken of. Oxford University talks about ghost assumptions or ghost strategies. You need to unearth and bring those assumptions into the public domain and ask yourself, on what assumption are we basing our business? Yeah. That is one. But 2, more importantly, what assumptions need to be true in order for us to succeed? So those are critical. If the assumption is false, your business is going to collapse. If you can't get the assumptions which need to be true for your business to succeed, then you need to pivot in order for you to be in a place where you can succeed. Really important. Then, of course, you've got your mission. Then you've got some of your P. So who are the players in the market? What sort of people do I need? What processes do I need to put in place? What partnerships do I need to embark on? All of those are important. And you need all of this to be on paper. I know it's a long list, but it's important because you are committing your energy, your time, your treasure, and your talent. And so you don't want to get it wrong. Beyond that, then you look at your scorecard, your balanced scorecard. What are the 4 critical ways by which we're going to craft a dashboard to measure success. Then you look at scenarios. Scenario one is your transactional scenario, and normally that is cash flow forecast.
Mm-hmm.
But then you should also look at your conceptual scenario, which is where is the disruption coming from? Okay, and you need to run those scenarios. And then the last one is your contextual scenario. Is this the good place for me to set up the business, or do I go next door? All right, and then lastly, you look at your scenarios in respect of technology, scope.
Yeah.
Right, really important. To cement it all, you're going to ask what sort of strategic initiatives are we going to embark on in order, and all of this is encapsulated in your strategy.
Theodore.
Yes, ma'am.
You can understand why people never get around to do it, because this is a lot of work. You have to think of all these things, and it's almost like, I mean, one thing I've learned about family business and ensuring you have the right system, it's like you have to be very intentional, because some of these things, coming up with assumptions, testing it, doing people are just, I'm just trying to make money.
You're trying to make money. If you look at it in the medium to long term, you don't want to put your energy, your treasure, your talent, and your time in an enterprise that is going to fail. And I say that because, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, right party to right party, camel herder to camel herder. By the third generation, you've hit the crunch. Mind you, this is not a localized to Africa alone. This is a global phenomenon. So it's not just in Africa. But let me also say this, that most businesses, about 90% of businesses will fail within the first 5 years anyway, unless you do the hard work. So do the heavy lifting up front. And if you don't want to do the heavy lifting, get somebody in to help you do that. Get Theodore or some other agency to support you to do the work. You can do that over a weekend, over a number of months. The vehicle can be moving and you can be changing the tires as it's going along. Beyond your purpose and your objectives and your strategy, you're looking at what are the strategic initiatives we're going to put in place. 1 or 2 or 3 things we're going to do so that we can win. But beyond that, you have the whole issue about capability. How am I allocating resources? And your resources are simply your time, your energy, your treasure, and your talent. Okay? If misapplied and not applied to your priorities, then you're going on a wasted journey. All right? Beyond that capability issue, then you look at systems and you look at structures. We are still looking at the micro. We haven't got to the macro yet. And then beyond that, you have your board.
We don't talk about boards like they don't exist.
I know they don't exist, but let me help you here.
Okay.
The boards don't have to be wahala. They don't have to be too much trouble, too much heavy lifting.
Okay.
Your board is the custodian of the strategy, and they bring control, they check conduct, and they also check abuse of power. All right? So it's really important to have a board in place. But you might say, look, we're a small business. We don't want to go through all of the issue about boards. Look, having an independent board ensures that you're more likely to succeed than not, exponentially. But if you decide that you don't want the whole issue about the board, then have an advisory board. Okay?
It's always a safer, people are more comfortable with it.
But, have an advisory board where you have maybe 4 or 5 people, you meet maybe 3 times a year, and you can get wisdom. Worst case scenario, you can have a gray hairs board. And what I mean by that is you can invite people like mentors. You can invite people like mentors or coaches or sponsors to have lunch or brunch with you once a quarter.
You owe me lunch.
Once a quarter. And you sit for 3 or 4 hours and you just talk. And that 3 or 4 hour engagement will allow you to glean insights for any issues, challenges you may have. All right? So
Yes.
it doesn't have to be very difficult at all.
And as I'm listening, I mean, I feel like people put this down as a checklist and just try and take it one after the other and make sure that your business is, set up and you have all these things.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so assuming all this is done and we have that good business in place, right? I want to move into the challenges because everything you said highlights challenges that we have in the African context.
Yes, very much.
And so I want to discuss, I think you would agree with me. They say one of the biggest challenge we have is with succession. I don't know. You may differ, but yes. So let's talk succession. If somebody's done all this, you have a business that's thriving, you have everything in place, and now it's time. Founders getting old. Let's talk about the challenge of succession. What do you think our problem is in Africa? What is it that we can do differently? Talk to me about succession.
All right. So yet again, I'll say that the issue around succession is not localized to Africa. It's a global phenomenon because it's about human beings and their style of leadership. So succession is a leadership issue, not an African issue. Right? And so right from the off, you say, if you're a business leader, a leader in a business, family business, how should I go about structuring the business for success into the future? Governance, like I've said, is critical. But part of the governance is the issue around succession. Okay. And if the founders decide that they're not going to spin it off, then they should be looking to second generation, third generation, fourth generation. And really, it's not so much about family as about talent and skill into the next generation. After all, there are so many global businesses which are family affiliated, which are not run by the family, but the families have an interest in them. But speaking specifically to the issue of succession, what I would say is to look at a number of issues. One, if there's a founder or there are founders, what is their vision for the business? What are their values for the business? If they make the decision that it needs to carry on beyond them, then the question is, do we do family or do we do an external party? If we're going to do family, you need to define who family is and what family is. Is family children? Is family wider family? Is family the spouses of our children, for example, etc.? So you need to be clear about who family is, what family is, and then you need to address the link between family and the firm. All right. So how does family enter the firm? And so at this point, you will say we are a family business, so we need one, business governance, two, family governance. So in business governance, you're looking at strategy, you're looking at stakeholder management, you're looking at shareholder promise, you're looking at skills that we need, you're looking at systems and structures, you're looking at statutory obligations, you're looking at scenario planning, you're looking at security in terms of risk. All of those sit in the business governance or corporate governance. On the family governance side, you're looking at the founder's concerns, you're looking at the family's concerns, you're looking at the firm's concerns, you're looking at the future concerns, you're looking at the fortune concerns, you're looking at whether you do philanthropy or foundational concerns, and you're looking at whether you set up a family office to drive all of that. And so the critical success factor on the family business side is to look at whether we have a family charter or a family constitution. That is a codified document which seeks to collate the values, the vision, and the wishes of the founders.
Okay.
Not only for the first generation, for generations to come. Okay, so it is a compounding of the values, the wishes, and the dreams and goals and aspirations of the founders put into a document. And usually that document, the family constitution, is not a legally binding document. It's more of a voluntary document saying we are aligning our values for the future. That is one. Beyond the family constitution, then you would have something like a family council. So that would be the rival or the asymmetry to the board of directors.
Yeah.
And the family council will be a small knit number of family members whose role it is to be the eyes and ears of the family. Okay? And then lastly, you have the family assembly, where on an annual or half yearly basis, everybody is considered family, comes together to share in the success. Okay. Again, there should be intentionality.
That's the word for the day.
And again, please, this is about professionalizing your business. So you don't need to do it in-house if you don't have the skills. Get professionals in, lawyers, accountants, auditors, etc., to come and support you on this journey. And for all the families who embark on this sort of journey, one, you're more likely, significantly likely to succeed in terms of succession planning, intergenerational wealth transfer. Two, you're more likely to address any intra-family conflict. Three, you're more likely to aggregate and compound your wealth for the generations to come. Four, you're more likely to keep the family together as a unit, as a source, as a source of, as a talent pool and a talent source. Because you're being intentional, for example, you be intentional about coaching, mentoring, sponsoring. You be intentional about education. You be intentional about internship for the next generation. You be intentional about the culture and the values that are needed for the family. So all of this speaks to intentionality.
I was going to list all these challenges and then we discuss it, but I realized, your answer is just perfect. And you've given the solution that indeed, if we have the family constitution, if you have the council in place, if you have your governance rights, then you avoid all this, because you realize in our context, you have a lot of challenges with conflicts, issues coming up. And it's probably because the founder hasn't been clear and laid out things. If you have the constitution, you would have said all this. Now, when you were talking and you said start with the definition of family, I felt like, well, that's the first point of the problem, because who decides what family is? Maybe it's good for the founder to do that because it's their thing. They can decide. But what if he's doing this at a point where he's not on good terms with a certain group and so decides to do things based on emotion? Like, you are in the business, so what are some of the challenges? What are some of the experiences you've had, without telling us, into detail?
Of course, like I said, it boils down to two things. One is leadership, and two is mindset.
Yeah.
Okay. Everything rises and falls on leadership, and leadership rises and falls on mindset. So the moment you decide that this is a family business or a business family, you need to ask yourself, who is family? In some instances, adopted children, so everything rises and falls on leadership, and leadership rises and falls on mindset. The moment you decide that you're running a family business or a business family, then you need to define who or what family is. In some instances, adopted children aren't family. In some instances, illegitimate children aren't family. In some instances, children conceived by surrogate mothers are not family.
What?
In some instances, in vitro fertilization, IVF, is not family. It's a choice.
Is this real life?
Yes, it is a choice.
Wow.
It is a choice. Okay, so if um, husband and wife, husband is founder, wife has surrogate child.
Mm-hmm.
If wife carries the child, that's fine. If a surrogate carries the child, it's not fine. Yes, that is so. Family, how you define family, is specific to the leadership of the founder.
So founder needs to be intentional and make sure that's clear.
Very intentional. And, in our African context, is it the nuclear family or is it the wider family? In Ghana, as you're aware, we have matrilineal, we have patrilineal, we have uncles and aunts who are considered family. All right? So do you bring all of them in or not? In some instances, when it comes to inheritance, the firstborn inherits everything. Primogenitor. That used to be the case in England. Okay, where the firstborn male or the firstborn was the person who inherited. That's changed now. But so in some families, it's just one person, the firstborn. If he's male, fine. If he's not, problem. If we're talking Sharia law in Islam, the distribution is 2 for the man, 1 for the lady.
Has that changed?
No, that's Sharia law. So the founder will have to be intentional about creating structures to defeat that purpose. Okay, but you need to define family. Sometimes in-laws are not family because they can bring conflict. So sometimes in-laws are not considered family for the purposes of operating the firm. But when you have the family assembly, they can come in.
Family.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I mean, you did say, so things like this will be put in the Constitution, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, you said that the Constitution is just a voluntary document. I mean, it's not legally binding. So if a founder has a Constitution in place, but doesn't have a will, and he passes away.
Okay, so there are 3 documents that you can use to arrest any of the issues. Okay. The first document is clearly the Constitution, which is a voluntary document. The second document will be a shareholders agreement.
Okay.
And the shareholders agreement is a legally binding document. So that allows you to address all of the issues and all of the imponderables that we've spoken about. All of the challenges can be addressed in the shareholders agreement. Beyond that, in terms of succession and who gets what, you can put that in a will. Alternatively, you can do something inter vivos during your lifetime, which would be something like a foundation, a company, or a trust. Okay. And those are vehicles or entities which allow you to structure your wealth and succession properly. So, for example, if you take a trust, like I said, it's a vehicle and it's used to enable proper succession planning or intergenerational wealth transfer. And you use a trust for confidentiality purposes, tax mitigation purposes, forced heirship purposes, or asset protection purposes. Let me open each one up. So, in terms of confidentiality, sometimes you're incredibly wealthy and you don't want anybody to peer into the nature of your wealth. So you might be living in Ghana or some other country, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, wherever, and you want a measure of confidentiality, secrecy around your wealth. So you would put it in a structure like a trust. In terms of tax mitigation, some jurisdictions are more tax friendly than others. So you would transfer assets in a tax friendly environment.
Is it safe?
10 out of 9 times is very safe.
10 out of 9.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, depending on which.
It depends on where you go, which jurisdiction you go. There are Premier League jurisdictions, and those are, you can mention Dubai, you can mention Guernsey, Jersey.
Mauritius is a popular one now, right?
Mauritius is very popular. British Virgin Islands, otherwise known as BVI, Cayman Islands. The others that are less popular, Singapore is a good place.
Really?
Yeah, Singapore is a good place, good jurisdiction. There are others that are less popular, and I won't mention them. So you've got confidentiality or secrecy. You've got tax mitigation. And then you've got forced heirship. You know, we spoke about confidentiality, tax mitigation, and then I spoke about forced heirship. And that's where the Sharia law comes in. So, for example, in Ghana, if you haven't got a will, PNDC 111 comes into play. It divides your assets into 16 parts. 9 parts go to your children, 3 parts go to your spouse, some go to your parents, and the rest go to your wider family. Now, imagine that you've set up a family business and it's very successful, multi-million-dollar. That's not what you want.
No.
So you put it in a vehicle which avoids all of that intestacy. Then beyond that, asset protection. You know, asset protection here, we're talking about your daughter or your son meets a gold digger who marries him or her because you're a wealthy family. You want to make sure that the assets don't end up leaching or bleeding to the other spouse when there's a divorce, okay?
Okay.
Or you have a son or child who has an addiction, either gambling or drugs. If you give them money, they'll just squander it, or they're immature. Or again, for example, if your children are going to live in what I consider to be a kind of tax hostile environment. So, for example, if you take America, America taxes you on your global income. All right. So if your son or daughter marries an American,
automatically
there is an issue about mixing of wealth and leaching of wealth. If your son or daughter decides to be domiciled in the United Kingdom or America, there are issues. In England or in the United Kingdom, inheritance tax is 40%.
It's a lot.
So 40% of anything over £330,000 is taxed at 40%. So if you're worth £1.33 million, the first £330,000 is 0 rated. The next million, £400,000 will go to the exchequer.
As in you've worked for.
Exactly. So you need to be intentional and intelligent about where you put your wealth to mitigate your tax and mitigate some of this. So that's why you put it in a vehicle like a trust for asset protection.
Wow, Theodore. I mean, I'm sitting and as you're talking, I'm ticking the boxes when it comes to my own business and saying, okay, where are the gaps, you know? But you've taken us through everything, right? From setting up a business so that it's, you know, it's a thriving business to begin with, having the strategies, having your purpose, adding value, all of that. And then you've taught us the best practices. Really.
But we haven't talked about the macro, which is the environment within which the businesses are engaged in. And, you know, every environment comes with challenges. Some environments are more business friendly than others. You know, if I wanted to set up a company, I could do that in 1 hour, buy an off-the-shelf company in certain jurisdictions. In other jurisdictions, it takes 2 weeks, which
Just
is
to get your
336 hours to get the company. So
Yes.
by a factor of 336, immediately you begin to see the challenges you're going to have in doing business in that particular environment. All right. And not to mention the economy, not to mention legislation, which makes it easy or more difficult to do business. Some environments are so challenging that if you last a year, it's tantamount to lasting 10 years in another jurisdiction. So for those in government, because in that regard, it is government's role to make the business environment more enduring, to lower barriers and give tax concessions so that businesses can flourish. You know, we've gone full circle, and we come back to the fact that SMEs are the engines of growth
Yes.
in every economy. And so the easier you make it for SMEs to thrive, the better the knock-on effect for your economy to thrive and grow.
So this is good because I mean, the next segment I was going to talk about future-proofing your business
Yeah.
and growth strategies, and that's what you've touched on, because I think sometimes people get stuck, or you're in your own world. You feel this is our business, and you just focus without looking at the environment, what's changing. I mean, now we have technology, AI, all these things. So 1 minute your business is thriving, next minute you're gone. So the points you touch on are very important. Now, as we wrap up, I'm just curious. I mean, what is that one thing that you wish founders of family businesses would do? I know you've listed a lot of things, but I want one advice directly to founders, one advice directly to the family members, or let's say the next gens, those who take over. There's so much that we could discuss, but I mean, because of time, let's give advice to the founders and then the next gens.
Very, 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 very simple.
Or should I ask for 3 pieces of advice?
I will give you 3.
Okay.
All right. The first is leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And my definition of leadership is influence, inspiring, informing yourself and others to think better, do better, be better for positive impact and positive outcome. So, number 1, leadership. Number 2, mindset. Mindset. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Leadership rises and falls on mindset. So, have the mindset of a family business family, because transformation comes from the change of the mind. And then lastly, intentionality. Intentionality. If you check the leadership and you check the mindset and you check intentionality, you're good to go for the most part.
What is that one thing you wish African family businesses would do to change the narrative? It's a deep one.
Still come back. Have the mind of a family business, a business family. That's the mindset. See your business through that lens. The lens should be that of your mindset. And to be frank, the sharper your mind, the better able you are to navigate. So I would say erudition, consumption of quality information allows you to think better and therefore do better and therefore be better for positive impact and positive outcomes. So normally I ask one question, which is, what are you reading?
All the time, anytime Theodore means.
And the subtext is that in view of the VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous business environment, what quality information or data are you taking on so that you can sharpen your mind, so that not only can you have sustainable competitive advantage, but perhaps you can have sustainable collaborative advantage in the environment in which we
No. All right. So as we wrap up, I mean, I like what you say
Yeah.
because she always asks me, Mary, what are you reading, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, what has the response been like? Do we like reading? Because I feel like people don't make time to, improve personal development. It's like, let's chase the money. That's all we're about. But I feel like, no, if we pause and learn, you can do things better. It's like sharpening your axe. So what's your the response been like?
The tragedy of the modern man is that never has knowledge, insight, and wisdom been so democratized, and never has he been so preoccupied with fluff.
Hmm.
If I may hearken to the good book, it says, seek knowledge, seek insight, seek wisdom or understanding,
Yeah.
for it is more precious than silver, gold, or rubies. What we need to understand is that wealth is an end, not a means. The means to wealth is knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And so we should be directing our energies and resource allocation to knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, the output or outcome of which will be the wealth that we are seeking. And so if you say that you're seeking wealth and the wealth is not coming, it's because the means has been ignored. And you're misplaced priorities. So I find it tragic, absolutely tragic, that with the democratization of knowledge and insight and information, we walk about as functional illiterates.
Sad.
Yeah.
Keep asking the question.
I
think
will
that will
keep
trigger
asking the
people
question.
to read more. So.
Yeah.
But Theodore, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on our podcast. I mean, I know, I just listening to you, I can tell there's so much more that you can give to us, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I think we should leave it this way so that our guests will reach out to you directly and then you can, because what you find sometimes is there's no one size fits all solution to some of the problems,
Indeed.
right?
Indeed.
So you've given us the, get knowledge. You talked about having a business that is sustainable by doing all this, have your vision, have all these things. And then we've also talked about the family governance, making sure you have that advisory board, the family council. And then we've talked about family governance, making sure you have the constitution, the council, all of that. So I think you've given us really good information that any business can work with. And certainly if there's more, they could reach out to you. So thank you so much. You're a busy man, and so I truly appreciate you making time to sit with us on Family Business Diaries. Thank you.
It's been a privilege. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So I promised you guys a masterclass, and I'm sure you've taken lots of notes. Super, super excited. I think it's a great way to start season 3. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you can always follow us all podcast streaming platforms, Family Business Diaries. Check us out on YouTube at Family Business Diaries. You can check our website, familybusinesshub.co, and join us on social media at Family Business Diaries for all the behind-scenes actions. Thank you so much and see you on the next episode. Bye.